Hi all, welcome to another episode of Humans Beyond MBBS. Today we have with us the doyen of Indian healthcare industry, none other than Dr. Narottam Puri. Uh, how do I describe him? Very difficult. Okay, still let me try. Doctor, yes. Consultant Emeritus ENT, yes. Board member NABH, or the one who pioneered hospital accreditation in India, advisor FICCI Healthcare Services, or the brain behind most prestigious healthcare awards in the country, advisor Fortis Healthcare, or the one who pioneered corporate healthcare sector in the country, or closer enough, a mentor for many like me, an ardent advocate for healthcare workers, especially in COVID times. More beyond healthcare, a popular cricket commentator and orator par excellence. He has helped shape healthcare in India in the last 5 decades. But for me, my dear Puri sir, whom I can always turn around for any solutions. Welcome, sir. Welcome to this episode. You have inspired many, and through this episode, I think more millions of doctors will get inspired. So my first request to you, sir, that your long journey, successful journey from the horse's mouth, how can we hear from you from your MBBS days till now? What has been your journey into healthcare, sir?
Namaskar, everyone. May you all remain COVID negative, but otherwise positive in your approach towards life. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you for your kind introduction, and it's always good to talk to you. It's been a long association with you from your days at Fortis, and I'm really glad to be on this in this troubled time, shall we say, not just for the healthcare sector, but also for the entire world. This is the likes of which we would not wish our enemies even to be going through. My days were far less traumatic when I started. I graduated in December 1968, and therefore I've had the good fortune of having seen 5 decades of healthcare. My own personal journey is not important, but I think the fact that I was able to drink at many wells over the years, being a part of public healthcare, a teacher, and then private healthcare, first as an entrepreneur, then from the perspective of working in not-for-profit, being on the board of not-for-profit, and then working in the corporate sector and being fortunate enough to work on the board of corporate sector. And my other involvement with quality and safety movement through NABH, and also to a limited extent, since I have had the opportunity of working with the health insurance sector. I'm one of the directors in one of the health insurance companies. So I've been very fortunate. God has been very kind that it has afforded me an opportunity to work in virtually every nook and corner of the healthcare space. My beginnings were somewhat mediocre, to say the least. During our days, there never used to be competitive examinations. All that you had to do was to get 60% marks in pre-medical, which I managed to do. And that virtually ensured that I didn't even apply to any other medical college. I wanted to apply and get into Maulana Azad Medical College. I applied, I got in, and that's the end of the story. So from the perspective of getting into medical college from pre-medical, it wasn't all that tough for me. But I think mentally I wasn't really prepared for the rigor of the medical college. It was always one of the top medical colleges and remains so. And it was very tough in the initial days because you tend to kind of take it easy, like many of us are doing now after being exposed to COVID for such a long time. A certain fatigue factor sets in. But in my case, it took me a little while to get adjusted to the medical world. I guess I was too relaxed for anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. And I needed a jolt to get me going. I'd always been more interested not more interested, but I was always, I got into medicine not out of choice, really, but because I was very poor in mathematics. So I actually inquired from my uncle, who was a doctor, as to how much of mathematics does a doctor need to know. And he said, none, virtually none. So I said, that's it. That's what I want to become. So since I wasn't good in mathematics, wanted to join medicine, did well enough to get into one of the best medical colleges, and realized only in fourth year that I was very interested in ophthalmology, and that's what I wanted to do. I was fortunate that I topped the university in ophthalmology and ENT, but certain circumstances led me to let go of ophthalmology and join ENT and head and neck surgery, principally because I liked the department and the people in it. So those days, you never decided what you wanted to become. You didn't have the planning that you guys seem to have in what do I want to become, how much hours of work will there be, should I take up radiology because there are not too many emergencies, or skin should, it never occurred to me. In fact, during my house job interview, I was asked that you are one of the toppers. You can walk into any department. Why are you taking medicine and surgery, which were the two major things? I took surgery and ENT. So he says, well, why are you taking such a small subject? So I told him I like the people. So it was as simple as that. And I was very fortunate again that I did well in ENT and head and neck surgery. I topped again in the university, won the P. Vicherian Award, the AOI fellowship, and all the other things. And then it was kind of expected that if you are one of the better students and one of the better performers in examinations, like standing first in MBBS, MS in your subjects, you become a teacher. But there I realized that it was not because of this factor. I actually loved teaching. If there is one thing that I wanted to do in the world, it was teaching. And so in a way, you can say that I'd found my niche when I became a teacher. And it was possibly one of the worst days of my life when I got promoted and transferred to Pondicherry. And I could not go because by that time, there were certain family circumstances, certain pressures on me, both personal and otherwise. The otherwise part was also important because of the simple reason by that time I had got into doing radio and television sports and was reasonably successful. And I'd started writing a lot for various journals and newspapers, etc. on sports. And it had kind of become a second line of work for me. Not well paid, I must say, because most of the radio and TV those days, most, well, no, I shouldn't say most. Actually, it was all India Radio and Doordarshan, and we were only paid a pittance. But the fact of the matter is that I'd found the two things that I loved most: teaching and broadcasting, telecasting, and writing on sports. So I was living a dream world when I was teaching in Maulana Azad and I was doing radio and television in Delhi.
Great, sir. Great. In fact, while you were talking, I realized there are some parallels which I could draw. I joined medicine as a choice because I am from a family of doctors. I didn't know that there was anything else expected, but I was also extremely poor at maths. And one of the incentive of joining medicine was कि 10वीं के बाद maths नहीं पढ़ना पड़ेगा. And I also topped the university in IE and ENT, although I end up doing medicine. So what a privilege to draw some parallels, sir. And I totally believe that your calling is teaching because you have been mentoring so many people during the course of your life itself. But sir, when you were a teacher, when you were I would say assistant professor or a senior lecturer, as they would say at that time, administrative responsibilities grew as you grew in your stature and hierarchies, right? the head of the department had the most administrative responsibility, and then the dean of the college. And that was a structured way in which I found my dad also growing. My dad, I think, is a contemporary to he's 67 pass out, right? That was what I had seen. But when I did my DNP in medicine is when I got my first exposure to Fortis Healthcare in Mohali. And it was an extremely different thing. But at your level, sir, how did you conceptualize this corporate health sector? You have been one of the pioneers of this healthcare sector in India. How did the whole idea emerge? How did you got propelled into the private health sector, and that also at the level where you are?
Well, I think this is something quite unplanned. I, first of all, never wanted to get into private practice, forget about private sector. And during those days, in 60s and 70s, there was no organized private sector. The industry or healthcare industry wasn't really at all an organized industry. And certainly it was not corporatized. It was mainly small nursing homes, or they were not-for-profit large hospitals which were charity-based. For example, the church-led organizations, St. Stephen's Hospitals, Holy Family Hospital, or others like Mulchand Hospital, Gangaram Hospital, Tirathram Hospital. They all had some base from the perspective of charity. But they were considered private because they also admitted private people. And that's not something that corporates or private sector ever entered my mind. To be very honest, when we were teaching, majority of us thought that private is the dirty word. And, you thought yourself to be purer because you worked for the so-called cause. And despite the fact that all my teachers happen to have been doyens in their fields from the private sector, because during our days, the private sectors teachers were allowed to teach you, and half our staff was full-time and half our staff was private. But somehow this feeling of charging a patient for services provided didn't quite enter into your head at that time. So I guess we were hardwired, or our DNAs were structured like this, that, healthcare is a socialistic phenomenon, and you should provide it altruistically rather than from the motive of profit. So, as things happened, I happened to be a reluctant participant in private sector because I had to resign, and then I started looking around what to do. I joined a couple of private hospitals as a consultant, and then the concept changed. But your point about the hierarchical structure in a government organization still remains today, and I think that's unfair, not just to the government sector in the modern world, because all that you are doing is that you are making the senior most guy rise to the administrative level with no experience, and you don't even provide him with a crash course in what is required to be done. Which is why I think I support the formation of an Indian medical service, in which you should have, like the IAS, the IPS, the IFS, these people who become medical superintendents or deans, directors of institutions, they're given enormous amount of responsibilities with no training to fulfill them. And that needs to change. And I guess in our times, that wasn't the case. So when you're making budgets for the department, fortunately, I had a departmental boss who was least interested in this. So he entrusted it to two of us to do everything from the administrative point of view. But most heads of the departments during our days did not want to divest in millimeter of authority to the number two. So, or three. In our case, it was different. And which is why I think I feel blessed that I worked in a department with a very, modern ethos of, and a kind of a sang-froid attitude towards life. And anyway, my feeling is that you're absolutely correct in your assumption that that's not the way it should be. Corporatization in healthcare people misunderstand the word corporatization. They consider it to be something that is a dirty word. It's not. Corporatization, if you just look into the thesaurus or into Google search, it just means an organization. That is, you're doing something in an organized way, in which there is a structure, there is a process. And that's what you really needed to do. And I thank Dr. P.C. Reddy, who actually brought in the concept of a corporate hospital to India in the mid-70s. But I think it was very far from my imagination that I'll ever get into corporate healthcare. What did happen was that after I started working as a private practitioner and joined these not-for-profit hospitals as a visiting consultant, I realized the not-for-profit part was actually being done by us, the consultants. The hospital would make a profit, but the good part about the hospital was that it would invest the profit back into the running of the institution. So, but that's why we were called honorary consultants. So the onus was on you to make the money that you needed to survive. And I was again grateful to God that I did well. And then in partnership with one of my friends in the year 1982, we opened what we consider one of the most modern polyclinics. That was our first commercial venture. You happen to know my friend who was my partner in that, Dr. Vijay Agarwal. Both of us joined hands and opened a polyclinic which was air conditioned, which had piped music and things and plush sofas and things of that nature. And then we opened up a 30-bedded so-called nursing home, but 30 beds were enough for the four of us. So I think that gave me the entrepreneurial part and the understanding of the business part of healthcare to a little extent.
Great, sir. So when we start talking of business and P&Ls and Excels, I think the maths does not leave us behind, and it comes catching up in a very, very different way, in a very, very practical way. So in 2008, sir, when I was grappling between clinical medicine, I was practicing intensivist, and I was being entrusted with administrative responsibilities at Amritsar Fortis. I think at that time, when you were at the helm of affairs in Fortis, I came and met you to seek guidance. I always used to adore you, always used to hold you epitome of somebody who had straddled this very well. And I asked you, sir, should I leave clinical medicine, my practice, and go into administration full time? And I still remember on that day you said, do whatever you feel is right, but I would suggest that you should never leave clinical practice. And I'm aware that you have been practicing till this stage itself. Over the years, I tried to straddle both the things, but could not. And once I was given the position of running a hospital, I didn't get time to do clinical medicine. So for our youngsters today, sir, what is your take on this?
So it's a very difficult question to answer for everyone. You cannot generalize. I think it depends a lot on what kind of work you're doing. For example, if you're running a hospital, then that's a very operating type of a unit. If I were running a hospital, that's a full-time job by itself. It's very difficult to stop for 2 hours and start seeing your patients. And what I tried to do when I was in Max earlier and then in Fortis was that I wasn't sure that I would fit into the corporate structure of the world. And I did not want to give up my medicine at all because I was a successful practitioner and then be on the streets once again starting from scratch. And so I kept it with me in one of the prerequisites that I put to the guys who hired me is that I'm not going to give up practice. Fortunately, they said, fine, if you find the time, do practice. But after some period of time, I remember sometimes around 2000, 2001, I found that I could not continue to operate. So I had to give up surgery. And I only did consultation, which I continue to do till now. And there are people within my unit who are very, very good, better than me, and they look after the surgical work. Do I miss that? Yes, I do. But the fact of the matter is that over a period of time, I got adjusted. I guess I learned on the job, and I got adjusted to this world. And as things became tougher for me to find time to do that, the amount of time that I devoted to clinical work started becoming less. But this is as far as I am concerned. But for every individual, it depends a lot on what are you expected to do. You know, if you're running your own nursing home, your own hospital, some amount of administrative experience that you gain from outside, you try and bring to bear to run the hospital better. It should never be at the cost of your own practice. But if you are divided, should I go into this or should I go into that? That's a highly individual and one that you need to take with care and consideration, and probably give yourself a buffer time in between before you jump in off the cliff. Now, some people feel that jumping off the cliff is the only way, and that unless and until you jump in, you won't learn how to swim. But in practical terms, if an opportunity comes your way, which allows you to do a little bit on the side so that you don't lose track or don't lose touch, that helps. In my case, one of the major reasons why I wanted to stay in touch with clinical practices that I learned very early on, that those people who become pure administrators as doctors are looked down by administrators as doctors and therefore not taken seriously, and as doctors as somebody who's a turncoat who now lives in a glass house and hamare pe patthar फेंक रहा है. You know, but if they see you actually get your hands dirty, that they know that next chamber you are sitting in the OPD, he can't complain कि nurse नहीं आई. And so you know, if you are getting your hands dirty on the shop floor, that's the best thing. You remain in touch with the clinical subject, not because you are making any money out of it, but you are satisfying your own urge to remain in touch with your subject. But more importantly, I think you're doing a human service to the institution that you serve by remaining in touch, because you will be respected. You will not be taken for granted. A doctor who's not practicing at all, somebody because of your seniority may not say anything to you, but in their heart they will say, this guy is a turncoat, you know. He's now sitting in the corner office in the top floor of the building. He doesn't understand what we are going through.
Absolutely.
So emergency में बुला के देखो ना, तब इसको असलियत पता चलेगी. Now, if you are there, if you have seen this, you've done this, and you are still there with them, and the doctor and the nurse and the healthcare person, in my opinion and my experience I've seen, tend to accept what you are saying with not so much of salt, just a pinch probably.
Very valid point, sir. And I think the message which I take home is that stay connected to your clinical side as much as you can, but more importantly, dirty your hands so that they don't say कि इसको क्या पता क्या हो रहा है. That is the message I take from here, sir.